Alright, and welcome back to part 2 of Running Gun's game design breakdowns. We covered in the first episode our game design document, our GDD, our pitch, and pretty much the premise and idea core of production of how we designed Running Gun. In this episode, we're going to be covering kind of the art style of it, the visual style of it, how that really helped with design, having an idea on what we wanted the game to look like. We're going to be talking about the systems a lot more in depth. I kind of cover that quick in the GDC section or GDD section of the game on how weapons interacted with the game, but we're really going to talk about the systems of the game and go over our system sheet and stats and numbers and kind of the math behind it is a lot more in this episode. And then we're going to be talking about the boss fight that never was to be and what that design would have looked like, at least in its first iteration. So let's get into this. We have our art Bible here, which really helped us, and it changed from originally from our pitch. You may see some things very similar on what we wanted the game to look like visually and artistically. So first off, art style, we wanted to have high saturation, very bright colors, which actually didn't end up being a thing. In the first level, our first level is very, very dark, as you can see. It's dark tone, it's very neon compared to our second level, which it has a lot more brighter tones into it. So we really changed up how we wanted the level to look as time went on. The cartoony look we did keep. I spent a lot of time researching toon shaders and how to get a toon shader to work in our game, and really how we got the liquid shader to work in the game to really give Running Gun the look that it has now. A lot of saturation, a lot of dealing with post-processing. We had a lot of fights with post-processing. A lot of people don't like the bloom. A lot of people do like the bloom. A lot of those features, trying to also get it to work in the systems where you could turn those features off and turn them on and off and give kind of the more look that the player wants and the look that we want and within the game, because visual clarity was a huge design pillar for us, and we really wanted the game to have very good visual clarity. It's why a lot of like the guns and enemies have very specific outlines where if you just blacked it out, you could see. We want the player to know that's your assault rifle, that's your sniper rifle, that's a walker enemy, that is a drone enemy. They have very specific outliners because visual clarity was huge for us. Picking color palettes, picking color tones, again, this was like the first concept. Those were the colors we really want. A lot of these colors did stick with like the enemies and the guns and not really the level and environment, but that was just kind of just how it went on throughout development, where we saw the level change a lot, but we really wanted visual clarity to stick with the guns. That's why all the guns have the same color themes and the enemies have the same color themes as well. Enemies. So yeah, at this time the drone was already made, as you can see here. We did not have the toon shader at this time. That was not made yet or really thought of at all within the art process until later on, until how I figured out, how can I make the game more cartoony for players. But we did have an idea on like what we wanted the robots to look like. We had if you can look at the concept art on the right, we had our drone enemy, we had our walker enemy, and we had our tank enemy, or our final boss enemy, which didn't end up coming to light, as well as our supply drone, which is another idea that did not end up being in the game. But our walker enemy and our drone enemy were already done. They were made, and they were very well produced by our 3D modeler and our artist. Inspiration, we took inspiration from Star Wars for our enemies, other drone type enemies. We obviously took as inspiration from the robot dogs that their name's escaping me at the moment, but as you saw in the previous video, like that's a lot of inspiration went from there as well. Weapon design, we went through multiple iterations of the shotgun, as you can see, where version 1 the model was too round for us. It really didn't make sense, and then we kind of morphed it more into version 2. The color format, as we saw in our previous slide, is there in the AK, it's there in the sniper rifle or in the shotgun. We want it to really show that visual clarity. We want it to be futuristic. We want it to be very detailed. Again, as we point out here, a unique silhouette, and we want the LEDs to light up, to look cool, and that to show the player their ammo and how much ammo they have. This eventually morphed into a liquid shader, where instead of it being a light, it was a liquid in the game. As you can see in the shotgun, it has like a liquid shader to it. I think the sniper is a little bit more of a better example, as if we look kind of in the top right here, it has a liquid to it. And same with the AK, also I believe has a liquid to it instead of a light, to show the player that, hey, your ammo is going down the more you shoot. Looking at environments, the first environment that we had, it did not work at all. So we really went back to the drawing board with the first map to really hammer it down. The first map had a lot of refinement to it compared to the second map, which was made in like a week. But the first map had, we knew what type of obstacles we wanted into it. We wanted grind wheels. We wanted, pits that for the player to go down into. And we had very different iterations. It was originally a dome. If we look at old school art of the game, it was originally a dome, and we felt like the dome didn't end up working. Players would only kite around the dome, and they wouldn't really interact with any of the half pipes within the map. So we had to remove the dome and really force the player to kind of interact with the environment a lot more through different means. So it went through tons and tons of different iterations until we landed onto the first map that you have now. And we also looked at different arenas. We looked at, different skate parks. We looked at, cities to really see how we can build up that environment of the arena and the skate park and combine them into one for the player. So yeah, this is an example of like screenshots of the first kind of iteration of the map and what the game was kind of looking like. So this is very, very early on art of how our camera would look like and what the player would see as they play the game. It did not end up looking like this at all. It's pretty amazing how far we came, and from the beginning to the end. UI as well. We thought a lot about UI, of how we were going to send player information that they needed to know, as well as balancing that within the HUD versus within the game itself, as I said, with the weapon. So we wanted, in the UI, we want the player to at least know how fast they were going. It is a game about speed, and we wanted them to know what type of augments they had equipped. So that was our UI goal in the beginning, and also just simple UI with the quit, resume buttons, things like that, which evolved over time. Here's an example of a very early concept of how the UI would look to the player. We have a reticle. These actually did end up being in the game, where we had different types of reticles for all the different guns. We wanted them to show the ammo on the gun and not in the UI, very similar to like Dead Space, for example. That was, our goal. And then we wanted the player to see how fast they were going and what type of augments they had. Augments. What do the augments look like? So the augments were kind of categorized in triangle, square, and a diamond is what we categorized the augments for, and they would slot into each slot. They were also kind of color coded with green, red, and blue. So again, visual clarity was huge for us. We wanted the players to know what augment they had and what dropped and what they were picking up. We took inspiration from holocrons from Star Wars a lot for our 3D models, as you can see here, for our diamond, our cube, and our triangle. And then we also looked at, again, because visual clarity is huge for us, what type of special effects we would have in the game. What sort of sparks, explosions, and things would come off the guns, what the guns look like, special effects, particle effects. All these things were very, very big to us, because we wanted them to be unique to different enemies and unique to different type of weapons. for visual clarity. Again, just going over kind of level details, that's combining them all, what type of music we would use, and our logo. We had different variations of the logo for the game. We ended up settling on, I believe, 4 and 5. I believe we use 4 a lot more in the game's promotional. And that was kind of it for our art Bible. That was it for that pitch. Now we get into the math heavy side of things. So this was pretty much a sheet strictly made for me, because I wanted to know every system that was in the game. I wanted it out of the game engine, so I could give this to someone and they knew how everything interacted with each other. So basically, and I'm gonna explain this. Every weapon worked the same, with the exception of the shotgun and the exception of the power weapon. But for the pistol, each weapon had a damage modifier. That's how much damage the weapon did, base damage. They had a recharge rate. That's how many seconds it took for the ammo to recharge. They had a recharge amount. That's how much ammo recharged. So you would have, so for example, each bullet on the pistol did 10 damage. After 3 seconds, it would recharge 4 ammunition. It held a max charge of 17. It could only have 17 bullets max by default. And its charge cost, meaning how many bullets it used when you fired it, it took 1. So every 3 seconds you were getting 4 bullets back, and it held 17 bullets, and it consumed 1 bullet. That's the base of it. It's very simple. It gets more complicated with the shotgun, but that was the foundation of it. Each weapon had a knockback modifier, so this was, if you fired it, it was how much it would knock back the enemy. It had a bullet type, which again goes back to if you had shields, and you shot a shielded enemy, it would take only half damage, I believe. But if it had a armor enemy, which ended up just being normal, then it would take, and it shot a shielded enemy, then it would do normal damage. So this was again to make enemies more difficult and to make more guns more useful than others. It had a range modifier. This was basically a damage fall off, where if it was shot too far, you would have a damage fall off, meaning like some weapons had better range at shooting enemies than others. So the pistol, if they shot an enemy that was 100 range away, it would do less damage than if it shot an enemy that was below that 100 range. Then it had a spread modifier. This was to give kind of it a bullet pattern. This was mostly used for like the shotgun, for example. And so the pistol did not have a spread. It always just fired straight. And it had a bounce distance, which was originally the ricochet distance where bullets would bounce off of each other. Ricochet ended up having problems. We didn't end up with the ricochet modifier. We ended up with a piercing modifier where bullets would go through enemies instead. From there, you would have kind of different just like firing modifiers, where it was time between shots, where each player would have 0.2 seconds to shoot, meaning some weapons were more semi-auto, they were more spammable than others. Then we had a time between shooting. That modifier didn't really do anything. That was kept all at 0. Then we had bullets per tap. This was how many bullets were consumed or went out when you shot. This was mostly 1 for every weapon except for the shotgun. And then some weapons you were allowed to hold the mouse button and just let it loose, and others you had to click, right? And that was the basics of all weapons at its core. So going over each weapon real fast, we already kind of went over the pistol. Is semi-auto and only does 10 damage. It recharges 4 bullets over 3 seconds, and it holds a max of 17 bullets. It consumes 1 bullet from the magazine, and it's a bullet type that's shielded, so it's good against shielded targets. It has a range of 100. It does not have a spread. It takes 0.2 seconds to fire between clicks, and you cannot hold it. The assault rifle, again, low damage. It has 5 damage, but it takes 10 seconds to recharge. It holds a max of 25 rounds, or it recharges 25 rounds per over those 10 seconds, and it holds a max of 50, which means it takes 20 seconds total in order for you to get your full magazine back. It fires 1 bullet. It has a knockback of 100. Like the pistol, it's good with shielded bullet types. It has more range than the pistol. It has a bit of a spread compared to the pistol, so bullets will not fire just straight. They will, go right or left based on that value. And then time between shot is 0.1, so it fires faster than the pistol. It uses 1 bullet, and yes, you can hold it down, which means you can just go to town with the AK, right? I'm going to show you the shotgun for last, because the shotgun's a little bit more math heavy. The rifle damage does 30 damage, right? So it's the highest base damage out of any weapon, excluding the power weapon. It has a recharge rate of 10 seconds. It recharges 2 bullets over 10 seconds and holds 4 bullets overall, which means over 20 seconds, it takes 20 seconds for this weapon to have a full magazine again. It takes 1 bullet from each time you fire it. It has the highest knockback next to the shotgun, which means it will knock opponents back super far. It deals normal damage type, and it has the highest range of any weapon, meaning 500 range. It does not have a spread, which means each bullet will always fire straight. However, it has an extremely slow fire rate of 2. It takes 1 bullet each time you fire it, and you are not allowed to hold it. You cannot spam it down. You have to click it, right? This was all to give it a sniper-like feel. And then lastly, our power weapon is very simple. It does 1,000 damage. It overkills. It only has a duration of 6, meaning that you can only swing it or kill an enemy 6 times before you have to re-grab it. It has a clip force of 120, which actually the power weapon works more like the Halo energy sword, if you know that, where you dash to your target. So the dash is 120 and the distance is 50, so they have to be in the range of 50 in order for them to dash to the target. And the final thing is the shotgun. So the shotgun is a little bit more complicated because it fires more than 1 bullet. Every other weapon fires 1 bullet, but the shotgun actually fires 6 bullets, as you can see with bullets per tap. It also has a fire rate of 1.3, which is very, very specific for its animation, because the shotgun has a clock animation where you after you fire it, you clock it. So we have to time that with the animation. It also fires, and again, it fires 6 bullets. So if it fires 6 bullets, right, but you only have a magazine of 6, then you immediately go to 0 ammo. So we have to do a lot of math in order to even it out. And the math is not too hard, to be honest. It was really just dividing by 3 to make sure everything is divisible by 3, and so everything worked out with the shotgun evenly. So it felt to the player that the shotgun had 6 shots, and you would fire them. So you'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you were completely out of ammo. And we have to make it feel like it was recharging that 6. And this is the math behind it. So that's why if you look at the shotgun compared to the assault rifle, right? The assault rifle only has a max charge of 50, right? It only has 50 bullets total in its magazine. But the shotgun has a max total of 216. Why? Because that's divisible by 3. Because each time you're shooting, it's firing 6 bullets, and it's consuming 6 bullets. And 216, if we do the math, you fire the shotgun 6 times, essentially. But how do you recharge? Well, we want it to recharge like 3 bullets, right? So over 6 seconds, it will recharge 3 bullets. So what's a good amount of that? Well, it's 700 or 772. So it's really we're filling 72 shots. So everything's just divisible by 3 here and divisible by 6. So it makes the shotgun a little bit more complicated than all the other weapons to balance and to design. But in reality, too, if you do the math, the shotgun is the most overpowered weapon in the game because it's firing 6 bullets at a time, right? Each bullet is doing 25 damage, right? So if we do the math, right? What's 6 times 25? 150. So this gun is doing way more damage if you can land all the shots compared to any other gun, compared to the sniper rifle, compared to the AK. The only weapon that out DPSs it is the power weapon. However, the shotgun, if you look at our videos, right, it is extremely hard to land your shots. It has a huge spread, right? It's not like the other weapons where they're very pea shooter, very compact. The shotgun has a huge wide spread. It fires in a cone. You're not going to land every shot. It also has a damage fall off, you know. If you're firing that, trying to snipe enemies from a very far distance, it is not going to work. That's why its range is 50 and its spread is 0.1. It has basically a 1 spread, so its spread is a lot larger than other weapons. These are the base stats for the weapons, and even then, like, that was 10 minutes. That was like a lot, right? This may even go over to a part 3. That changes once augments are introduced. So we have 6 augments total in the game. We wanted more, but that did not end up being a reality. In reality, we only had 6. And again, we categorized them. So the first category, let's go over this. We call it Type 1 category. The first one increases your damage by I, or X. And the other one increases the fire rate by I, or X. So, what does that mean? Well, the first one's just the damage augment. It increases your damage by 5, which means each base damage of a weapon now gets 5 damage tacked onto it, which means the pistol's doing 15, the assault rifle's doing 10, the shotgun's doing 30, the sniper rifle's doing 35, and really the power weapon's doing 1005 damage, right? It doesn't really matter for the power weapon. It has a weight of 45, and this is how we dictated which one would drop. So our systems for this, and this went over many overhauls, is that we wanted the power weapons to drop from specific enemies. Type 1 only drops from, I believe, drones, right? Or maybe walkers, but they only drop from, I believe, I want to say drones. Type 1 only drops from drones. You can only get Type 1 augments from drones, and they have a 40, and the first augment, damage augment, has a 40%, really 41% if we round up, percent chance of dropping. And we did this through how most video games do this, I believe, is a weight system, where within the loot pool we have a weight number, which for this chance it's 45, right? If I was to change this to 60, well then everything goes up, and now it has a 48% chance to drop, for example. But it's 45. That is the base weight of this augment. Now, it's comparing that to the second augment, which is increased mag augment, which increases your magazine size by 25. And this has basically a 60% drop chance. Much, much higher than the damage augment. And what does that do to your weapons? Well, it increases your magazine. So each max charge goes up by 25. So, for example, the assault rifle will now become 75 bullets instead of 50 in the magazine, right? So you get a lot more bullets in the magazine now. However, it has a higher drop rate because its weight is 65. So the two weights then get added to the loot pool, right? To find the total weight. So the total weight is 110, right? That's the total weight of the loot pool. How do we find the total like percentage drop chance? Well, it's just the total weight. So it is the, you gotta excuse me for a second. It is the weight divided by the total weight multiplied by 100. That's all it is. That's how you figure out the drop chance. You can see I wrote formulas out here for this, so I could just plug in the numbers and change what I see in Google Sheets, and then I can put it in the game and put it in the engine to find out what my drop chance are for each total weapon. But really, it's just the weight divided by the total weight, and then multiply by 100, and that's your drop chance. That's how you're going to figure out what the drop chance of each augment is. And now theoretically, if I had like 20 different augments of type 1, then it would change up the drop chance of each weapon. But because this is only 50-50 in the grand scheme of things, I wanted to give one a little bit more power to drop than the other. This applies to every type. So type 2 would only drop from walkers, for example. These augments only affect the player's movement. So our first one can jump a second time after the first jump. So we gave the player a double jump, which means if you jump once, instead of it, you have to touch the ground for it to reset, you can jump again. Or you can have jump force, which if we go into player stats, you'll just jump higher. Really, that's what jump force is. And each one has their own, what the stat does, and they have their own weight. So the weight here is 40, and for double jump, and 20 for jump higher, because jump higher was honestly probably giga OP and had bugs, right? So that 40 and 20 added up is 60. That's the total weight. Divide that by the weight of the first item and times it by 100, 60%. So you have 60% to get 66.6% chance to get a double jump, and a 33.3% chance to get more jump force. The final augment is bullet behavior or gun behavior. Fires one more bullet. So type 3, these would only drop from trapper enemies, I believe. And they just increase both of them by 1, because increasing them by other stats would get very chaotic with the game's balance, for example. So the weight of these is 40 total. Fire one more bullet was a lot more easier, and we want players to have that tool to play with a lot more than other tools. So it has a 75% drop chance, where bullets going through enemies only has 25. It's the rarest mod in the game, right? What stats would these augment within the gun behavior? So if we take the pistol, for example, now bullets per tap would be 2. So you would be firing 2 bullets per tap, and you would be consuming 2 bullets out of your magazine. And then bullets going through enemies is just exactly what she said. Bullets would now go through enemies, and you can hit if they lined up properly. You can just armor pierce them, so they go through. This was originally ricochet, but because of design and coding issues, we changed it to bullets going through enemies. Here's kind of like the stats of like how it would change up the numbers wise. So again, when you apply the augments to the weapons, pistol's doing 15 damage, assault rifle's doing 10, the shotgun's doing 30 per bullet, and the sniper rifle's doing 35 damage per bullet. The increased magazine, if you got that, you would have 42 bullets in your magazine, 75 for the assault rifle, 241 for the shotgun, and 29 for the sniper rifle, right? Huge difference, huge power spike for the player. Finally, then it would fire 2 bullets instead of 1 for the pistol, 2 bullets instead of 1 for the AK, 7 bullets for the shotgun, so your damage would actually go up. So if you had the damage mod and the extra bullet mod, each 7 bullets is doing 30 damage, right? So if we do the math again real quick, 7 times 30, that's wrong, oopsie, 7 times 30, right? You're doing 210 damage total, but you have to land all your shots in order to do that. But each bullet was, so you're essentially doubling your damage. Same with like any gun, where now instead of it being 10, if you're firing 2 bullets at a time, you're doing 20 damage with the AK instead of 10 realistically. And if you didn't have the damage augment, but you had the extra bullet augment, then you would be doing, I believe the base damage is 5, you'd still be doing 10 damage. So again, just to know what my damage thresholds were in the game, what was overkilling, how much it was overkilling by, was super helpful to have this Google Sheet and just to know that. Finally, lastly, we're going to cover, before we go into part 3, because this is game design, there's a lot to cover here, is the player. The player has very basic stats, nothing we really want to mess with too much, but we went through different iterations of changing it. So we had jump force. Jump force is how high the player could jump, which is 2,500 jump force, and that's how high the player could jump. And then once you get the augment of the jump force augment, that adds another 2,000 to it. You're doing 400 and 500 like jump force. So you were just flying. You were going up. You had legs like no man before you. That was the fun of it. We want players to have that fun interaction with they could just hit spacebar and they could just jump as high as they can with using our movement mechanics. Friction force, gravity, slide speed, gravity slide mode, these all augment, how the speed of the player, the gravity of how much, how fast they would fall. If gravity was very high, they would jump and they would just whoop, go plummet down to the fast. Same thing with when they use control. That's the slide speed, is how fast you would stop, brake when you slid. Player speed had a base of 80. Of course, they kind of went over this the faster they went. Air speed was how fast you were moving in the air. Turn speed is how fast you could turn in the air, I believe. Brake is how that's the brake. And then you had your speed cap, which was 130. So the player speed was 80, which means you get 80 speed each over a course of time, and it would cap at 130. Then we had vertical jump force, horizontal jump force. This was when you were wall riding, so how much you could jump off of a wall. Rail grind force, this is how much speed carried over when you were rail grinding. And of course, just your basic stats, which is your HP and your health regen, which we have to play with because of enemy damage, right? So your HP was 100. You healed 0.5 health over the course of 1 second. That's how it worked. Eventually it wasn't like this at all, but I think I looked at other games, looked at League, I learned, and you could see I felt like this was a good amount of health regen based off of how much damage the enemy did to you. So next episode we're going to cover enemies and enemy damage and how they attack the player. This is huge and complicated. It's the same thing with weapons, where you have to balance how enemies interact with the player and how they interact with weapons now. And we're going to go over that, and then we're going to finish up of kind of the augment concepts, some concepts, ideas that we want to be in the game, and then we're going to go over the boss fight, and that's the design breakdown of Running Gun. So I will see you in the next part. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to check out the more development in-depth process of it, you can check out the blog on It's Not a Sport. Link is in the description to read about how we went over an art and everything throughout the process of Running Gun and my design process of it. I'm just breaking down more of the systems and things here in these game design breakdown episodes. I hope you guys are having a wonderful climb, and I will see you in the next part.